Hi, everyone. I'm Dom Famularo. I'm back at the sessions at a distance. This is exciting again today with this collection of great artists that we have. I want to first welcome, if you would, JR, John Robinson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Dom and Jules. It's great to be back with the sessions again. I just love this organization, and I love the power of, giving back, especially, teaching the youth. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now the unbelievable working drummer that is, I'm amazed that you're even home at this point, even with this COVID challenge. Would you please welcome Mr. Kenny Aronoff?
Hey, Don. And JR, I love what you just said. Ditto, ditto, ditto. Yeah, and this is my studio. I'm actually not at home, but I am in LA, and this is where I go every day. And I feel so fortunate that I have work to do here. I set my studio up a long time ago so that I could work here and people could send me files just like JR probably does also. So yeah, I'm here and I'm doing really well at this COVID time, and thanks for having me.
Well, Kenny, thank you so much. That's what we want to get into at one point for sure. This is the whole idea of all of this here. I want to also welcome great friend, fantastic entertainment attorney, producer, great drummer, Mr. Paul Quin. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Hey, Dom, always welcome and great to be around people I love dearly. Great to see you, Kenny. Great to see you, JR. It's been too long.
Fantastic. Let me throw this out, gentlemen. COVID, the change of the music industry has been dramatic. So I'll start, JR, with yourself. Within this change, what have you been doing during this time to if anything, to improve anything about all of who you are?
Man, that's a beautiful question, and I could go on for a long time about this. It's interesting because of this situation. We all think maybe we're not going to be working. And, I've got a full-on studio here in my house. I've probably worked more since COVID in my house doing, probably, 10 different projects over the last 5 months than ever. I mean, I just got done this week. I judged these 20 songs for these young little singers talking about guns and violence. And I took one of the songs and produced it. So that's going to be coming out as a single. You're going to see that in Modern Drummer coming up. And then I just finished today a Japanese boy band, which was a little out of my wheelhouse. But I dug it, man. So there's a lot of stuff. I've finished a film and I've got a video out now. I mean, we could go on a long time. So it's interesting. What I think, Dom, real quickly, is you dial into your talents in the most desperate of times. Either you have it or you don't. And I've just really researched in my heart. And, I'm working on my third record, and just a lot of great spontaneity and a great art form has come out.
Boy, it's so great, John, because you had the foresight to have your studio just for yourself. So when this kicked in, you were able to move forward. That really is great forward thinking in the process. Kenny, yourself too, what's it been like now, not having the life that we had before to the life that we have now?
Well, like a lot of people, all the touring that I was going to do, I was supposed to go out with Joe Satriani, and his record, landed on Billboard at number 8. The whole world tour shut down, and then Fogerty, that shut down, and some other things I was doing. But like JR, I mean, I saw the writing on the wall a long time ago when you probably know Sherry Sutcliffe, JR.
Sure, very well.
Yeah, and she called up and said, if you happen to be in town, I got the session. And I started to see that the budgets were changing, so I got a studio going. And so by the time this COVID happened, I was already up and operating. And just like you, all of a sudden I thought, I wonder if people are going to stop recording music because the budgets, and it's the opposite. Right. It's like music is such a healing, positive thing, because music is a feeling thing and humans are feeling creatures. It makes people feel good. So anyway, I've got a lot of work here all the time. And the other thing was, Dom, as you well know, because you speak too, I have an agent, and I was doing these corporate speaking things, and that shut down too. So being proactive like I was with the studio, I got cameras and lights and TV monitors, and have made it possible to do virtual speaking when that time comes, or to film myself. And I've been having a blast filming all kinds of things in my studio. So I'm overworked. I'm swamped,
Yeah.
And one more thing, it's like probably like you guys, all of a sudden, I never ever ran my gear because I always have people do it because of the COVID. I'm learning how to do stuff I never did before. So I've actually learned a lot,
Right.
from this whole experience. It's adapting and adjusting to stay relevant. That's what we're talking about,
Right.
right?
That's
Yep.
well said, Kenny. So, Paul, I got to go to you, Paul. Just the fact that you've got tons of clients, and you as a performing musician also, but tons of your clients in the entertainment field. What's it been like with the shift that you've seen?
Well, obviously on the performance front, things have slowed down a little bit. We've done some recording, live streams, stuff that everybody else has been doing, none of which has been generating any revenue. But on the legal side, I'm busier than I've ever been. There is no shortage of people who have problems. And I think one of the interesting things about COVID is people have now had the chance to sit back and realize what they don't know. So sometimes that involves my phone ringing and people saying, what do I do about this copyright? What do I do about this person? I had a great conversation with a client the other day who had somebody come over to record some vocals on a tune. And so they did that, and the person that recorded the vocals ended up just loving it so much, but the guy who wrote the song, my client, hated what this person did on it and told her she couldn't release it. And she took the masters with her, and she's planning on releasing it. So how do we stop that from happening? There's actually a pretty easy way to stop that from happening. Yeah, so all these things are just cropping up on a daily basis. People are super busy and have just as many problems as they ever had in the past. And now they have time to address them.
Interesting. So, JR, are there ways that you keep yourself self-motivated? How do you motivate yourself just to keep moving forward every day? Projects, how do you do that?
Well, again, like, Kenny said, I think I lost 60 dates this year. And that was just with one artist. And, I'm juggling 3 right now. So knowing that that's going to come back next year, and also knowing that, I produce mentally in my head also. So when I'm not playing drums or I'm not playing keyboards or writing, I'll still continually do that in my head, even like before I'm going to sleep. So I'm already prepared for the next day. I'll already have kind of an outline I've thought of that I'm going to do tomorrow. And whether I follow the guideline, it doesn't matter. The point is that I've set my brain in that direction. So knowing that I have something to do. And let's say there's nothing to do. Let's say Kenny and I got nothing to record. I'm still going to go record. I'm going to find something to record. And a wise man, partner of mine, Hawk Walensky, who wrote Ain't Nobody, who is just a genius after getting paid $20 million for the buyout.
Myself is genius.
He told me once, one day, he goes, if you want to be a writer, you need to write every day. I don't care if you're a novel writer or a songwriter or a poem writer or, I don't know what, but you need to write something every day. So that's what I do. That keeps me motivated.
But that's the difference, right, between people that are successful and people that aren't. You do it. You don't think about it, you do it. That's, I think, one of the interesting things that's come out with all the people we know in the industry during COVID is you can see them just churning out work because they've taken the choice and they've made the decision, I'm going to do something. I'm not going to do nothing. Yeah. And I honestly don't think either you, JR, or you, Dom, or you, Kenny, none of you would really seriously consider I'm going to do nothing because it's just not how you got to be where you are.
Well, it's so true, Paul. So, Kenny, how do you motivate yourself? How do you keep yourself on fire to want to push and allow your passion to be fueled every day?
Well, the thing is with all of us here, we don't have that issue because we're wired that way, right? It's the people who aren't wired that way that are the ones that really need the help with that because, and I always say, look, if you do nothing, you get nothing. It's like a math equation, 0 equals 0. So what I did was I wrote down, as soon as the COVID came down, I wrote down, well, this is how I was going to spend my year. And then everything that got shut down, I replaced it with, this is what I'm going to do to replace that. I took action. I put a plan together. And just like JR said, dude, I come to my studio every day because because that's what makes me feel good.
Yep.
Playing the drums makes me feel good. Recording makes me feel good. Even if it doesn't even end up on a record, this is what we do. When you accomplish something, it gives you a sense of self-worth. It makes you feel like at the end of the day, I accomplished something. And so I know that about myself. So just sitting around is not a good, not a cure for me. It's staying busy. I just stay active. You put a plan together and execute. And that's what I've done with recording, with speaking. I've been reading more books. I've been taking some courses. It's doing something. So that's what I would say. Everybody here, we all know that, but it's the people who are thinking like, what's the formula? And there's another thing I want to talk about that's really important, because this has affected a lot of people, is mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. You've got to stay healthy. You have to stay up. You have to stay positive. So that means, eating right, exercising right, meditating, whatever it is that you have to do to stay healthy is going to keep this machine operating at its best.
That's a great line, Kenny. And when you speak about that, intellectually, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, those 4 areas have to be balanced in what they are. Intellectually, reading books and doing certain things to inspire yourself, that can be very, very helpful. Physically, staying physically fit, for sure. Eating properly. Spiritually, could be everything about religion or nothing about religion, just about the spirituality of how you are. And that emotional balance, that's really where all your relationships come in, where if you can keep your relationships emotionally balanced, that's going to give you a much better place to start from. And I think your point is well taken. Those that are not that motivated need to understand that.
That's also, though, why musicians end up looking so young when they get old, though, because actually creating music through playing an instrument is the balance of all those 4 things. There is intellectualism involved in it. There is emotional component to it. There is a spiritual component in it. Look at everybody on this screen. They all look like they're 35.
And you know what, Paul? I mean, and that's, I think, Kenny, and you guys just brought up a point. We do this because we love it. It's not that we have to do it, but if you look at the world right now, because we're not out there doing it, they're now hurt. They're sick. They're struggling. And so we got to get back out there. I don't care if I'm playing a drive-in. I know like the NFL is, and Kenny, I know you're into it. They're talking about letting blocks of people in, so they're taking a risk there. But, we need to get out there and help kind of heal through music,
I agree with what JR said, because, see, we get to do it, but they need us. See, like I said, people are feeling creatures, and if they can't play the instrument, but we can make them feel. And so they need us. That is very, very, that's a huge thing right there. Yeah. And by the way, I heard that the Colts are going to allow 16,000 in the stadium.
Right. And I think Arrowhead is going to be 1/3 of 79, whatever the heck that is.
So that's, that's like what, 25, 28?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
26.
Yeah.
Right.
26,333.
Yeah, I was going to make a Patrick Mahomes joke, but I'm not. Anyway,
I love Patrick Mahomes. Oh,
I do too.
Dude, you should. I thought about you that whole season.
Oh, hey, I struggled for 10 friggin' years, man.
I know.
So now we got 10 years in front of us. That's all good. We got to start playing out, Yeah.
And to that point, JR, many of the young bands that are out there, and even some of the up and coming bands, they're doing these parking lot gigs where they're in a parking lot and they're performing, setting up so everyone's in their cars, and they can even to a certain degree tune into their radio and hear the band from their car stereo system. So there's a whole new thing coming out of this.
Well, creativity, this is the perfect time for creative people to come up with creative solutions. So, if we can't come up with some way of bringing that music to people, then shame on us.
The question really is, how do you maintain or fuel your creativity?
Well, I mean, I guess you got to, and I think Kenny will test. I mean, you wake up, you look in the mirror, and you go, are you going to go there or not? And, and there is no other choice. I mean, I'll be honest, COVID, I had my hair was frigging out like this, and I looked like an old lion. And then finally, I went and got my hair cut, and because it was legal for that day. And then I felt like a friggin' Tessie doll, where, never mind, the hair grows, but, and not shaving for a week or two. And then all of a sudden, I'm not in a beauty pageant. I don't care.
You are a lion. Come on. Everything about you is lion. No, I don't mean lying. I mean lion.
Except I'm a Capricorn, so. Hey, you know what? It was something else. Kenny and I, we played golf a few times, and we had such a great time doing it. Yeah. But I reflect on that thinking, well, we could just be doing that and playing golf for 5-6 hours and wasting a day.
Yeah.
And I say, screw golf.
Yeah.
Let's do what we do.
Dude, JR, you got such a positive attitude. That is like, it's infectious. I have that attitude, but it's so inspiring. All you guys, it's like, my God. I mean, it's just so awesome. Dom, when you were asking the question, I think what JR was saying, which we all are saying, is you just got to get up and take action. Just one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
It just do something. And before you go to bed, like you said, I'm the same way. I can't shut the brain off. It's always thinking. It's like if we were in a jail cell, we'd invent something to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We just would.
I can't imagine that. That would be very interesting. You and I in a jail cell together.
Oh my God.
Hey, and you know what, Paul? You could do a Nike commercial and just say, just do it for us.
If that ever happens, do me a favor and call me.
You know what? I don't think it'll be a problem. They will throw us out of that jail. Nobody. Well, they'll just say, "Will you guys stop thinking?"
That'd be a funky jail cell. I'll tell you that.
It would be a funky jail cell. Yep.
Oh,
Kenny, if you would, Kenny, talk about your book. Kenny, talk about what inspired you to write the book and what brought all those ideas out.
Well, I mean, it's an autobiography, so it had to follow my story. And I guess the big thing about the book is, besides the stories, it's just about how all of us, in this particular case, me, how I became this little kid growing up in a town of 3,000 people with no role model of how to be in rock and roll or how to be a session drummer. There was no rule book. There was no school. And how this little kid, well, in my story, I saw the Beatles on TV when I was 10, and 50 years later, I get called to do a CBS special called The Night That Changed America, which is honoring the Beatles for that Ed Sullivan show I saw when I was 10, with 72 million people saw it. And now I get to play drums with Paul and Ringo, along with 7 other artists, and I mean, that's like dreams come true. So the book is kind of like, well, how did this kid get from point A to point B, and all the struggles and getting fired and getting hired and getting fired and winning and losing, and how I got there. And the story talks about things like hard work, self-discipline, perseverance. It talks about adapting and adjusting to stay relevant. It talks about being creative and innovative. And the big one is talks about serving the team. It's, when we're young, we think it's all about me. And when you get older, as JR and I know, being big session guys, it's about we. It's like JR and our job is really one thing only when you're making records. Get the song on the radio to be number one. That's it, man. It's not about me. It's about how can we get that song on the radio to be number one. And so the book is all about those things. And then there's stories that kind of are exciting, but that's basically what the book is about. And what I didn't even set off to do it, by the way, Dom. It was somebody convinced me to do it, and I thought it was going to be, you just do a couple of interviews and the book's done. Well, 4.5 years later, what a nightmare. Oh my God.
But I have to ask you guys, I'll start with you, Kenny. What was it about that night in February of 1964 that when we heard this band just shifted us to what magic did they have that drove people of our generation to this intense desire to want to play music? What did they have?
Well, first of all, there was nothing like that. I mean, there was nothing to watch on TV anyway, except for The Wizard of Oz, maybe, and the Thanksgiving Macy's Day Parade, and finally there was some NFL on TV, but there was nothing really to watch, so we were outside playing. So when I came, my mom yelled at us to come in the house, me and my brother. I thought I was in trouble. And you're looking at him, and they're in suits and they got long hair, and then all of a sudden, Paul goes up, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then it burst. It was electrifying, Dom. It was just pure electricity. And it was excitement. It was passion. It hit me in the heart. I was bouncing off the walls. And I literally asked my mom, after I figured out who they were, to call them up and ask them if I could play in their band. I mean, I'm 10 years old. I mean, what did I know? I mean, you ask your mom. And they were visually and audibly, emotionally, every which way, spiritually, physically, the whole thing. And so, of course, playing drums, I was drawn to that. When you start playing drums, all of a sudden I was feeling that same thing. And my first band was the Alley Cats. All I could afford was a snare drum and a cymbal. And we played Beatles songs. And I shut my eyes and I thought I was in the Beatles.
JR, what was like for you in the early days when you first started coming up? Was there anything that really kind of influenced you at such a high level like that?
Well, of course, the Beatles did. And so, what was that, 64 February?
Yeah.
I was, how old was I? I was in fourth grade.
Oh,
but my sister was four, and Kenny and I, we got things in common because I'm from a town of 7,900 in Iowa. So, Midwest, same kind of thing. I don't go near the country western people. They were over there.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I was really into big band, transition. And then all of a sudden, again, we were probably playing outside, and my sister was 3.5 years older than me, and she goes, "We're going to watch the Beatles on Ed Sullivan." Okay. So we sit in front of the TV, and it was almost like maybe Star Trek about episode 5. Finally got good. But they just crept out. And of course, yes, I was already playing drums also. I started a year before that, and I was attracted to Ringo. But it was the way they were set up, like a 3-1 thing, in these perfectly groomed suits.
Yeah.
And they all look good, and they're singing live, and the audience is having coronaries. But I kept watching my sister, and I'm watching her, and I can see that she's in love with friggin' Paul out of the gates. So I'm going, what's so special about him? What's so special? And then finally I go, oh, he's playing a bass. Oh, let me go to the guitar guys. So I'm looking, and I go, I can do that. So I started playing guitar the next day.
Wow.
And so, I was always a piano player and a drummer, but, guitar is a little easier to play. And, but I was like, I can do that. I was just watching my sister, and I realized she was just stunned.
Yeah.
And we all were, and, I ended up becoming a Dave Clark 5 fan.
Yeah.
And I saw Dave Clark 5 in 1965. And I was just blown away by this whole British invasion. And it changed the way we played drums, I think. Because, and then we got Cream that showed up.
Oh, yeah.
This really unorthodox drumming style. And, and Ringo kind of playing southpaw parts. And just different stuff that, we weren't accustomed to or ready for, I think.
Well, it's kind of funny with that British invasion, and then you bring in Jimi Hendrix into this. There was such an amazing time that there was so much going on. Paul, what do you see with your clients and people that you're dealing with as far as the influence of the Beatles? Are there still references made back to the band? How do you see that? My
clients fall into two categories. They fall into the older folks who are the established session players who do the touring work, folks like JR and Kenny, and then the young up-and-comers. And I have to tell you, it's massively depressing to me that some of the young up-and-comers do not focus like they should on the giants of history upon whose shoulders they hope one day to stand. I've had clients in their early 20s who will say, yeah, I think my dad listens to them, but I've never really listened to the Beatles. So I will often, not really the job of your counsel, but sometimes I will send them home with listening lists. Go home and listen to this because it will make you a better songwriter. I was actually minus 8 months when the Beatles played on the Ed Sullivan Show. So it makes me feel very proud to be the baby here. Although I will tell you, I grew up not very, very far away from all those guys.
Right.
Youngest of 5 kids, clearly a Catholic afterthought, as my youngest sister is 9 years older than me. So I grew up with sisters. In fact, my 2 elder sisters were expelled from boarding school in North Wales for sneaking out to go see the Beatles.
Oh.
So, I have a family issue. And in fact, my youngest sister's ex-husband was the lead singer in a band from Liverpool called The Chants.
Right.
And The Chants used to open for the Beatles
Wow.
at the Cavern in the early days, 62, 63. And
Man.
The Chants were kind of Britain's answer to the Temptations. So they used to have Pete Best, George Harrison, Paul play the backing for them. And if you go to the Cavern and you walk down the circular staircase, it's not really the Cavern, by the way.
I know.
When you walk down the circular staircase, there is a mural on the second landing of my brother-in-law. So the family is, we're attached to that. And in fact, my nephew, when he graduated from the Liverpool Institute for the Performing Arts, was one of the ones selected to perform with Paul at the Liverpool Philharmonic. So the family is there, but I was not around at that time.
That's pretty good ties, though. I love that.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good tie.
What you all have, is you guys are like, what legends are made of, the history that you have in this industry and what you continue to do. I got to ask you, I'll start with JR. Was there a mentor or people that saw an ability in you that gave you guidance and support to assist you along the way?
Many. I mean, obviously my father, even though he was strict as a 5-year-old, me learning how to play piano, I think I was just not ready for it because you got to be math savvy for that. And I thought he was a bit strict. My mother educating me by listening to big band records, that got me. But outside of the family, I had 2, maybe 3 instructors. This is before I'd met Ed Sof or Alan Dawson. A guy named Dick Bauman, who was a trombone player. He was my junior high band director. Always connected with all the heavyweight cats, knew everybody in the industry, and always wanted to go out with Kenton and never did. And it's interesting. I wasn't the first drummer in 7th grade. We went to school 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then high school was 10, 11, and 12, which I still prefer. So I wasn't the first drummer in 7th grade. There was this other guy, and I was just sitting and watching him, and then I took over. And then they asked me, do you want to play with the adult band? And, these are all the band directors in Southwest Iowa. And I go, okay, so I'm 15, and I really learned a lot. But we did a record in 1969 in Omaha, a Mid-America Jazz Festival, and we won that. And that was my first ever recording. So Dick Bauman was influential. When I was a really young kid from my church, there was a guy named Lionel Foley from the University of Chicago, who was a percussion major and ended up being our high school principal, and he was in our church. And so he started me on rudiments, very strict, and then some of the other band directors. So, and then, in my opinion, Ed Sof is probably the greatest teacher that ever groomed the planet. He could look at any of us and, create and say, oh, that's a bad habit. Let's fix it.
Wow.
But, the young band directors, I think, were incredibly influential.
So that music program in school was extremely helpful.
Totally. It was 100% essential. Obviously, I live in California. It's a struggle here. Where I'm at, out here in Thousand Oaks, and, my son Jack is here, and he just graduated high school. By the way, props to him, just won the Quincy Jones Outstanding Musicianship Award. Yay.
Yeah. Wow.
But, Thousand Oaks has a good music program. But other LA schools, are struggling.
Well, they're being cut everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, someone has made the decision somewhere that the arts are not as important as we all believe they are. And we'll all pay the price intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally down the line.
It's been proven. There's a school in Calgary, because I went up there and spoke there a couple times. It's been proven that school, it's modeled after sports and the arts, and everybody has to do sports and everybody has to do the arts. And one of the biggest takeaways is that you're a team player. You're learning how to work with other people, individuals. But they've also proven that it makes you do better in science, math, history, and English. They have
no question.
They have the highest academic record for the last 15 years in the entire country.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's no question. The studies are endless that having playing a musical instrument in high school and in middle school make it less likely you will commit a crime, less likely you'll take drugs, more likely you'll get into college. I mean, it is staggering how much evidence there is that people still choose to ignore.
Exactly.
And Kenny, you ended up studying some classical studies, so you had a whole other level of your percussion, education.
Yeah. Well, like JR, my parents were extremely supportive. My parents' turntable, it was all jazz. Jazz and classical, and they grew up in New York, so jazz was like their language. So they would bring me to see like Thelonious Monk, Dave Brubeck, the Modern Jazz Quartet, Stan Getz. I mean, it was just, and then the Boston Symphony Orchestra. It was right there. So I was drawn to drums because of the energy. Of course, then when rock and roll came out, I was like, whoa, I'm doing that.
Right.
But, the music program in my high school wasn't good, so I was a jock. I mean, I was a rock jock. I was long hair, playing all the cool rock bands around. I was the young guy that got in the older bands like you. When I started studying with Arthur Press from the Boston Symphony Orchestra, because like you, JR, there was some guy that was getting better. I was like, what's he doing?
Right.
And he started studying with Arthur Press from the BSO, and he wasn't teaching drum set, but his technique was getting better. So this guy, to make a long story short, it wasn't whiplash, but it was getting close.
Wow.
He was brutal on me, and he got me into mallets and timpani, and it was one of those. All right, real quick, he says, I show up, he goes, what's your name? Kenny. Kenny what? Kenny Aronoff. What have you prepared for me today? I'm like, nothing. He says, do you play mallets? Do you have a mallet piece? I went, what are mallets? I'm like, oh my God. And then he goes, what about a timpani piece? I says, well, I've never played timpani before. And he goes, what do you play, Mr. Aronoff? And I went, drums. So you're going to love this. So he says, let's go downstairs. This is before I even got in the house. We go downstairs, and he puts on spinning wheels. So, and I'd jam into it in my house, in my barn. And about 30 seconds, he rips me off the drums and points me over to a practice pad. And that's where it started. So, but here's a critical thing. Why didn't I say, F you, I'm out of here? I was popular in high school. I had the best rock band. I was a jock. Why would I want? But for some reason, I was enamored and drawn to this guy. And that was the beginning of it. Maybe he was like a coach. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. I wanted to get better. I did 5 years of music school, 1 at UMass, 4 at Indiana University, 1 year Aspen School of Music, all classical. Tanglewood, I spent 4 years trying to get into that. Started studying with Vic Firth. And man, I had the discipline down. And George Gaber at Indiana University was ruthless. Yeah. I mean, I walked in for my first lesson at Indiana University, and I didn't have a pencil and eraser. He says, you get an F today, and get the effing out of my office. Don't ever show up without a pencil. And you know what? I never have since. And, he was brutal on me, but he was trying to prepare me for, what was to come. And it stuck. It stuck with me. He said a lot of things that I became the #1 timpanist at Indiana University. By the way, Erskine and Jeff Hamilton were there when I was there. Right. And Erskine looked at me as a classical percussionist, and same with Jeff before I became this rock guy. I'll never forget, it's 6 weeks from graduating, and Mr. Gaber goes, he was deep up here. He goes, I want you to do this tambourine excerpt. I'm like, tambourine? He says, sit down. And I'm like, uh-oh. And he goes, honest guy, he says, look, you don't know what you're going to be when you graduate from here. I'm teaching you skills. I'm teaching you discipline. I'm teaching you to be great at whatever you're going to be. You might be a basket weaver in Mexico. You might be this. You might be that. Who knows? You might be a famous rock drummer someday. And I went, I hope not. That's what I said. That's exactly what his point was. You don't know. And my mom asked him when she brought me there, and she's looking at this massive school and goes, well, Mr. Gaber, is Kenny really good enough to do this? And he stopped and went, Mrs. Aronoff, how the hell do I know? Ask that question in 10 years. You know what 10 years from then was? Jack and Diane went to #1. Mellencamp's biggest hit went to #1 about 10 years after that. And he was right. Who the hell knows? It was up to me. But that discipline I got from him, that school, and then later on, Alan Dawson, dude. I studied with Alan Dawson for a year and Gary Chester in New York. And the discipline from these guys and the support from my mom and dad made me who I am today.
Yep.
I definitely did.
So you have this level of discipline. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Paul, how do you see it now with the same thing? Were there mentors? Were there people? Was there a program that kept you going, that moved you forward?
Oh my gosh. Listen, I've climbed on the shoulders of everybody that's tried to help me. And I mean, as a drummer, my first drum teacher was a guy from the UK called Jeff Riley. Was a fabulous drummer. He toured with Shirley Bassey. Do you all remember Shirley Bassey?
Absolutely.
And Johnny Danquith. My problem with him is, like many Northern European redheads, I'm violently allergic to cats. He absolutely didn't care. There'd be 6 cats in the drum room while I was there. And by the end of 15 minutes, I'd be tears streaming down my face. I'd have snot all over my lips. And he'd be like, no, swing, play the quarter notes louder on the swing. And I'd be thinking, I'm drowning here. He really motivated me to learn technique, to learn rudiments. But, my inspiration came from multiple avenues. My dad was a huge inspiration for me. My father was disabled, never heard him complain one time in his life. He spent his last 8 years in a wheelchair, still never heard him say there was something he couldn't do. I remember when I was newly married, we went to the pub and he said, well, I'll play darts with you. And it's like, Dad, you can't even stand up. And he's like, so?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
So, you learn those things. And I grew up listening musically. I grew up playing to records,
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard Jack and Diane. I remember spending forever trying to get that fill right. And all I can think is, but there's so much space in it. It is just so much easier to just play 16th notes over the top of everything. And I remember sitting down and trying to play Ain't Nobody and turning around to my drum teacher at the time and saying, yeah, but it's a drum machine. And him going, no, it's not. Yeah. Just trying to get that little hi-hat gliss in place, so yeah. I think it's either, like Kenny said earlier on, it's either in you or it's not, to spend the time to inspire yourself and build on the inspiration of others to do what you want to do. And, these days, my kids are my inspiration. And I got to tell you, Dom is a huge inspiration. Dom is a phenomenal, motivating, good guy. And he's a hell of a drum teacher. We once took a 9-hour bus ride from Paris to somewhere in Germany. And where the hell did we go?
Dinkelsbühl.
Dang.
Every tour stops there. But, we worked on technique for 9 hours in the back of the bus. I'm sure it was much more beneficial for me than it was for Dom. But, nevertheless, we surround ourselves with people that inspire us if we get that opportunity to do so. I'm inspired by just being on a Zoom call with Dom, Kenny, and JR, no doubt about it.
Awesome. Great attitude.
Yeah, man.
Great attitude.
But that's really where success is, to have that kind of an attitude. And listen, with all the success now, which you guys have had and continue to have, and that's the key aspect, you continue to have success. Let's talk about the business side. The sessions really is about, a part of it is about what can we explain to the next generation about the business skills that are needed to not only develop success, but to then maintain success. JR, I'll start with you. Are there any, how do you focus on the business? You've got all these projects you're working on. You got to balance it. You're in the studio working, you're producing, you're recording, drumming, keyboards. How do you organize all that?
God, now you make me think about it. God, I need therapy. No, I'm kidding. I'm an analog guy. I've got a big old analog date book over here, and I make sure I write everything down so I know that I don't screw up the next day. So with that in mind, and in relation to the kids, and Kenny, I know you've been aware of this union thing and the pension.
Oh yeah.
That what went down here, and what went down is a victory for us temporarily. And what's going to happen is if the kids start not wanting to be a union member, which is the gravitational direction it looks like, there may not be, an end game for them. They may get something up front for doing something, but, what are they going to do when they're over 50 years old? they don't know. They just think life goes on as a 18-year-old or a 20-year-old, where you and I were busting our chops hard at age 20 and preparing for this. So, I just recommend to all players, even if you're just a simple rock guy, look into that union aspect. And of course, Dom, I know you've presented social media from the get-go. Ever since I've met you, you were really on top of this. And I know Kenny and I are now almost trying to catch up with you. And, there's so many avenues to do this. And, like I'm going to actually now look at a YouTube account, but actually starting to do things. But, I don't want to be perceived wrongly either. I don't want to have any politics involved in who I am. I just want to output good vibes, great music, maybe how did we get there, organizational skills, things that I like, gardening, football.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just well-rounded human things. And I don't know if I ramble a little bit, but so what?
Point well taken. I mean, it's you've done something which is very human. You're balancing your art, you're balancing your business, and you're balancing your personal side. And those two, when they're balanced, put you at a place where you can now become more human.
Yes. Yeah, that's well stated. Well stated.
Absolutely. Kenny, what would you say? How, with your business skills, how do you organize yourself with all that you're doing?
Well, actually, it's pretty crazy now because the social media, and I call it digital platform because it is the way. There's a marketing guy who's a genius. Sasha Strauss talked about this, and he said, "I'll put this like this." He says, "Hey, Kenny, are you involved with TikTok?" I went, "Nah, it's not my thing." And he says, "Why not?" I said, "Because I don't want to make silly videos." He says, "Well, how about 1 billion people might see who you are?" And his point was, it's not whether you want to do it, it exists. Yeah. It is the marketing platform. You talk about LinkedIn, which is more business. You talk about Instagram. Of course, Facebook is still huge. And then you still got Twitter. The point is, it exists. This is how people, the new generation, not even the new generation, this is how people are going to see product. I don't care if it's music or whatever it is. Yeah. YouTube channel. Google and YouTube are the biggest platforms for people to see music right now. And so it's not whether I like it or not, it exists. So I've had to embrace it. I'm not selling records. I'm not making my solo record, but if you want to market yourself in any way, shape, or form, you're going to have to embrace this, the digital platform or social media, because this is where people are going to see who you are. And I know that when I post, like I just did something at East West for a Triumph tribute record. When I post that, and you got Chris Chaney and this guy and Mike Klink, the producer, and I connect, these people on my social media. Let's see, I got 300,000 fans on all my platforms, and then you add their fans, all of a sudden maybe, I don't know, 0.1% see, oh, Kenny Aronoff, session drummer. Hey, maybe I'll have him play on my stuff. Next thing you know, I'm getting an email to my website, and even if it's at a small increment, it is working. Right. People are seeing that stuff, so I don't necessarily like it, and it adds up so much more time. It's crazy, and I did hire someone to do it at one point, but they represented me so wrong. I went, give me this back, because they weren't talking the way I talk. So it's a pain in the butt, but it exists. And everybody's jumping down that rabbit hole to be seen. So on the one hand, everybody has a fair chance. On the other hand, you're competing with millions and billions of people all over the place. It just exists. So I think we have to embrace it. It sucks, but it exists.
Yeah.
It really is. But, Paul, we've talked about it at many of our panels and sessions about the importance of social media. Social media really is about relationship cultivation. You're cultivating people to know who you are, and your relationships are developing. Then what to do with that, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah.
Well, you see it with your clients, I'm sure.
Well, I have clients that are very skillful on social media, and I have clients that are very not skillful on social media. But, I think one general thing is, we shouldn't ever look at any one area in which we work as completely separate from everything else. So social media has to be understood as a tool. Just the same, whatever we do is a tool to get us to where we want to be. And, you know, one of the things I really have to tell a lot of the young artists that come to me is it's okay to not know things. And it's okay to admit to not knowing things. Just find the right person to ask to fill the gap. You know, we all have to work hard, especially in this financial environment for musicians where things have changed so much. You know, there were times when you could have somebody else do all those things for you. But really, we have to do a lot of that stuff ourselves now, you know, whether it's booking gigs, booking sessions, you know, very few people have somebody else that does that for them. And same with social media. So, but be aware of what you don't know and don't be afraid to ask. Frankly, there's nothing more frustrating than somebody that speaks as if they have knowledge about something they don't know anything about.
Wow. I wonder who that might be.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
I know. All right, moving on.
Yes. Next subject.
Well said, Paul. Well said.
And I would just like to say I was not talking about anyone on this Zoom call.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't think so, but that's good. Thanks for clarifying.
Let me ask this final question. There are these could be young teenagers that are watching this, that are inspired by music, that may not have exactly the direction they want to go in. They may not even have the support of their parents, but they have this desire and this drive. And they see, they see themselves doing something in the music industry, and they're looking for that knowledge, that wisdom that they're not getting from maybe their local teachers, they're not getting from their parents. What would you say to that next generation that could lift them to find some hope in the music industry? I'll start with JR.
We have this desire as individuals, whatever it is, to do something, and whatever it is. And if it's music based, I don't care what avenue of music. I mean, quite frankly, and Kenny will agree, we need more people in the business side representing. And there's an awful lot of people that are just walking around not knowing what to do. But if you have this beautiful feeling inside you, and you can't quite understand what to do with it, you have to follow your road. You have to figure out what you want to do, and sometimes it's not going to be pleasant. And as a matter of fact, I mean, half of our career may be great, and the other half is really hard. You know, it's a struggle getting to this level. So, and you know, a lot of people I talk to say, why would anybody want to be a musician in today's times? I think today's times are the most perfect time to be a musician, because there's new uncharted territory for these young kids to do. I would, though, profess education similar to myself and Kenny, and there's nothing wrong with learning something from somebody else and applying it to yourself. I think there's a great disrespect with the kids today that think that they know everything because they can record on an iPhone. And in reality, geez, no, they're way wrong on this. But they need to understand the path from A to B and to enjoy it. And I think one of my final thoughts is, you know, if you don't love what you do, then get out.
Really, well said. It's got to have that deep passion for sure. Well said. Yeah. Kenny, what would you say to this next generation?
Well, I'm going to pick up with right where JR left off. It all starts, like I said, people are feeling creatures. So you definitely want to tap into your heart. I mean, your brain is telling you stuff, but really your answers are in your heart. It's all in your heart. And if you ever love to play an instrument or love to play music or whatever it is, you got to follow that path, because you're eventually going to come back to that. It's all in your heart. So you could sit there and say, or you could have a parent to say, oh, you shouldn't be a drummer, you shouldn't be playing music. You might not do that, but eventually, if that's what you want to do, you're going to come back to it anyway. So tap into your own passion, your own heart, and then follow it, and then do as much as you can at the thing that makes you feel good. And I tell musicians, you know, that that obviously you can't play out live. You can't play out live right now. So people aren't making the people that we're playing live. Let's say in LA, making enough money to maybe pay the rent. I say do whatever you have to do. Get 3 day jobs, whatever it is, so that you can play music, because at the end of it, that's what makes you happy.
Right.
So you be working a day job so that you can do what makes you feel great, as opposed to just doing everything that doesn't make you feel great. And where does that leave you? That's the beauty about music. It's a win-win no matter what. We were in the greatest time in music as far as making money in the studios, going on tours, getting paid a lot, because people were selling millions of records. JR's been on millions selling records. I've been on millions selling records. Everybody was making money. So those were great times. But the common denominator between those times and now is still, if you love music, do it. Do whatever it takes to do it, because that will make you feel happy and feel love in your heart, and you will enjoy your life. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I want to chime in just one more thought on what you just said. These young kids, let's just say 16 to 25, maybe 25 is a little older. This is where your brain is absorbing the greatest amount of information in your whole life. You're going to continually be learning. As now we're getting older, we learn in a different capacity. But I remember when I was that age, I was a sponge, and I was learning stuff that I didn't understand, even though I was learning it. And I just, a word to the children, the kids, the youngsters, just learn right now. Get it. Learn it now while there's passion in your heart.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Paul, what would you say to this next generation?
I'm sure my dad did not come up with this piece of advice to me, but you have to remember, none of my siblings went to college. I was the only boy, the first chance that one of my parents' children would go to college. And I dropped out of high school to go on the road with a rock and roll band. And I fully expected my dad to be fuming, and he wasn't. And he said to me, the secret to happiness is finding out what you love and then spending some time to work out how you can make money doing it. And I made money as a drummer. I was kind of successful as a drummer, not really when I'm sitting in a call with you two, but generally speaking, I was kind of successful as a drummer. But I discovered something else that I really liked, and I like being a mediator. I like solving problems. I like helping people with the issues that they have, and that drove me into a second career of being a lawyer. And I know lots of kids when they go to law school say they want to go to law school to help people, whereas really what they want to do is just become rich. But I really went to law school with a desire to help people, and as a result, I've never become rich. But I'm rich right here.
Yes, you're rich right there.
Wow.
That counts for me more, and really that was the thing I always wanted to do. I want to be the person that somebody comes to and trusts me to help solve their problems. So I would tell youngsters coming up in this industry, do what you love, do what gives you satisfaction, and persevere. Don't take no for an answer. Keep going and work hard. And while you're working hard, be nice to people, and make the world a better place.
Yeah. Good. Well
Beautiful,
said.
Paul. The wealth of an enriched, rewarded soul can only be explained with joy at a high level. And I think all of you have achieved that, which is absolutely wonderful. We met at NAMM, and we were able to meet socializing at this huge convention, and we're hugging each other, and we're there. And now we're meeting virtually this way because of the challenges that we have. But even still at this level, the three of you guys continue to inspire and lift people with your words, with the music, with the way you run your lives. For that, we thank you from the sessions, from the bottom of our heart. Thank you, guys. Stay well, and hopefully we'll see you real soon.
Yeah, all right, Don. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.